Hi, everyone. Welcome to Move More, Worry Less. I'm your host, Paige Festa, the founder and designer at 13 Fit Apparel. Today, I have Michelle Blue here, who I met. I don't even know. I don't know what year that was, like many years ago, before I was into fitness, before I started 13 Fit Apparel. So it was over 6 years ago, which is so crazy. But she is a coach. She is the host of The Journey with Blue. I will let her introduce herself. She is super amazing, and I want her to tell you herself. So, Michelle, if you want to introduce yourself, tell our listeners who you are, what you're doing, and then we'll get into it.
You know, that sums it all up, Paige. I mean, yes, I'm Michelle Blue, and I just say, purpose-driven soul, right? I think that kind of sums it up of walking in my purpose and helping other people do the same, truthfully. So I've been supporting women in taking the leap of creating the life and business of their dreams. I do that through my show, The Journey with Blue, as well as the coaching support and being as transparent about my own story and journey as possible for other women to find light and inspiration to move from that.
I love that. I feel like transparency is just so important because it's so easy. I feel like, especially now with like social media and everyone's Instagram being a highlight reel, it's nice to have the realness of like what actually happens. So let's backtrack to when we first met and you launched a company. So just a little backstory on my end. I met Michelle through an intern when I was working in fashion, Derry, who introduced me to you because you were looking for a designer to design scarves. And so we started working together. So yeah, let's talk about your first endeavor.
I've lived so many lives already. I guess I go past.
Right? I know, it's a lifetime ago.
Yes, it does feel like a lifetime ago. But yeah, so that was my first business, Benet, my first kind of like leap into entrepreneurship, my first like bet on myself and going for my dreams. But yes, I started a luxury scarf company immediately after graduating college. And backstory behind that is when I was in school, I went to the University of Georgia and I was studying business marketing with a minor in fashion merchandising. And I had the opportunity to go on a study abroad trip to Ghana and went to learn more about the textiles and culture, met some really amazing girls that I fell in love with and was really in a place of how can I support them? How can I be a part of their stories? They had such beautiful spirits, such beautiful stories, and they were pretty much trying to walk in their own purpose of going to school and receiving an education and living out their dreams. And money was the biggest hindrance, obviously in a developing country. And on top of just the circumstances and having to pay for everything of school, it's just like, that's crazy. That was challenging for them. And came back, shared the story with my best friend. Again, I was like, what do I do with this information? How can I be a part of this? And from there, we, after a lot of iterations and trial and error, we did land on scarves. And and so from our scarves, we sponsored tuition, books, supplies, and uniforms to sponsor the girls' education so they could continue school.
So amazing. I mean, it was amazing then, and it's still a really amazing story. So I guess my next question will be how you moved from that business into your next endeavor and kind of what that transition looked like.
Yeah. So it was interesting. I don't think I knew it was going to be a full transition at the time when I started it, but life will life, and life will give you a lot of stuff that you didn't see or that you didn't plan. And essentially we had gotten to the point, Paige, after we had worked with you, is we had grown and developed, and we had gotten to the point where we were custom designing our own fabric, but we were doing silk printing overseas in China. So we had gotten like global distribution, and essentially we had made an order. We had worked with them several times, but one of our orders we got back. And after some time, I was reconciling the fabric that we had on hand to the fabric that we had purchased. and realized that we were missing a significant amount of the fabric that we had paid for, which would have been almost $40,000 of projected revenues for us, which is insane, right? And so it was a very hard place because there wasn't anything that we could really do. We're a small company. This is my best friend and I. We're investing everything at this point. To go to litigation, okay, who has the money for that? And then there's just so many contractual agreements. Like once it leaves China, then it's no longer in their, no longer their responsibility. So it was just a loss. It was a straight out loss, and there was nothing that we could do about it. And so, we did continue with the business, but after some time we realized like, okay, things just aren't shaping up. And so we ended up just kind of like phasing out of things. And this was a huge hit for me, because this was my full-time job. This was like, I didn't have any plan Bs. I didn't have any backup plans. And so, so a $40,000 losses, yes, that's a huge hit financially, but I always say it was a huge hit to my ego because now I'm questioning, okay, like Benet is a failure. Is Michelle a failure? Like, can I do this? Because my identity was so attached to my business, which is all I knew. I had started it right after college. So it was like Michelle and Benet were one and the same, which is something you should never do, right? Lethal combination. But it was a transition, and I had to go through a whole like finding out who I was apart from my business, apart from anything that I create. But kind of simultaneously during that time, I did have the idea for the Journey with Blue of, the talk show and sharing the story. So I had started that a little bit kind of in this overlap time, but fully took the leap in it some months later.
So how long was Benet in business?
So we were in business, I want to say, I'm trying to think. Okay, so I graduated college 22. So I would say almost 4 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to, I guess, sympathize, empathize, or one of those words. I don't know. You said like your identity was so connected to your business. And like, I just have to say 100% guilty over here. I said I empathize, but I actually can't imagine what it feels like to like start your business and feel connected to it and then transition out of it. I feel like I'm so like my business is my life. And I guess my point is I want to give you like a lot of credit for being able to work through that because I don't know how I would handle that. Like that. I can't even imagine how difficult and how the whole mindset shift. So my next question is, how did you get through that? I mean, it's, you're identifying with one thing so deeply and then it's no longer really a part of you. So, I mean,
it was a mess. It was not a easy, pretty, it was breakdowns and breakdowns after breakdowns. But what's interesting is that I was actually in New York by this time. I had just moved to New York. And so not only had I lost my business, but now I'm in a new city. I mean, as big as you can go with some of the biggest bills that you can have. And this was kind of like my first time navigating through life on my own at this level. And so it actually was a lot of stuff that hit me all at once. And there were times when I felt like I was crumbling. And so I had to do a lot of work. I had to do a lot of self-exploration, self-understanding. There was a healing process, like I said, a relearning process. It was a starting from scratch.
Yeah.
It
So
was a
how did
super.
that lead you into starting your talk show? Like, what was the mindset and the thought process behind that?
Yeah, so the talk show and the kind of business failure that was kind of happening simultaneously.
Okay.
So I had the idea because, again, I was starting my business, Benet, and I felt like, with social media, there was so much of the highlights. There was so much of the glitz and glamour, which
Mhm.
I could only show too, right? People go on my page and they saw like the magazine features and the travels and fashion week and X, Y, and Z. And I was like, well, I know that's not my full story. I wonder if that's the case for other people.
Yeah.
Right. And so I wanted to know, was I the only one going through these failures? Was I the only one going through more no's than yeses? So it was out of pure curiosity, right? Of like my own selfish ambition of trying to figure out, I know I can't be the only one out here going through these things, trying to make it work. Again, the lessons, the sacrifices, the failures along the way. And so the show was really to be able to share that, shed some light on that from other entrepreneurs, and be like a safe space, right? To encourage people who are on the journey, but also people who are interested in starting along the journey, right?
Right.
So that's kind of how it came to be. Um, and looking back on it, I say this to myself is like, I think there's another level of authenticity that I can bring that I may have even missed the mark on all this time. Um, and that's kind of a hard realization to have too. It's like, wow, I kind of failed at what I had set out to do, because there's still, like I said, my life has been messy. My journey has been messy. Um, but I don't know if that's always been conveyed. Right. I
Right.
don't. And so I think I owe that to people so that they know, like, again, that they're not alone in this. That yes, behind this pretty picture was some level of sacrifice, was a relearning, was a healing that had to take place, was a me having to become someone else to step into something different. Right.
Right.
And so, yeah, sometimes I think about it now. I'm like, man, did I even get that right? I'm not quite sure.
I love so much about everything that you're saying. First, I just want to say that it is so on point for what we are trying to accomplish through this podcast, because that has been a lot of my mission behind 13 Fit Apparel as well. The authenticity and the realness, because you aren't alone. Like
Mhm.
what you experienced in your business, I experience similar things. There's 50% of the time I'm like, what am I doing and who am I and what's going on?
Right.
But my Instagram feed doesn't necessarily show all of that, but I do try to open up and really share what's going on. Like, where's my mental health at? What's my physical health? What's going on with the business? Because I just think it's so important to share those things, because
Mhm.
nobody's life is perfect. We're all going through shit. And if we talk about it, we can help each other. And I feel like there's power in sharing your story too, because now you're like owning it and you're saying,
Yeah.
like, this is what I am and who I am. And and it also is the reason why you are where you are now. Like, if I didn't go through all of the things that I went through, I wouldn't have started my business. I wouldn't have then realized the purpose behind my business and then wanting to launch a podcast. Like,
Yeah.
it all takes you somewhere. And I think that your experience with like Bene has brought you to through an awesome journey to like a great place. And you're so self-aware and also not afraid to take risks to continue growing. And I love that. And I love that it's the journey with Blue, because it's not a destination. It's like it's always
Yeah.
happening, and you're
Right.
continuing to learn and grow. And that's something that we really stand for at 13 Fit Apparel too, because each collection we launch is inspired by the journey, not us saying, hey, this is what you should do to be better. It's like, hey, we learned this, like we're going to share it with you now.
Mhm.
So anyways, totally, I love it so much. So
Yeah. And I was going to say,
yeah.
And I love this perspective is like own your shit before it owns you.
Yeah.
And I think so many times we're running from the things that look ugly and messy, and we don't want to confront them. We don't want to
Mm,
say them because of what we think will look like to other people, or the fear of vulnerability, or exposing ourselves,
yeah.
or looking like frauds, or whatever the case may be. But it's like as soon as you own it and can speak it, is where
Yeah.
your power comes from. Right. That's when it's
Totally.
like, okay, I won't let this thing control my life and control my emotions and keep me down. It's like when I can say it, then I'm empowered. I own it. It doesn't own me. And I think that is, I think where we can all get to is realizing that, and that everything works together.
Right.
And I always say this, I'm from Georgia, Atlanta. And so you think about like biblically, they always say, count it all joy. And it's so true. Even in this mess, even in this shit, like it has gotten me to a place that's more beautiful than I had even planned for myself initially.
Right.
Right. So it's realizing that everything matters, everything counts, everything is still working for you, even in the mess, to
Mhm.
get you to where you're supposed to be.
Uh, so beautifully said. I wish I could speak as eloquently as you,
I
but
don't
that's
know.
my realness. That's my vulnerability. Yeah, no, and uh, I don't know. I just 100%, 100%. Let's talk about your talk show and the journey with that. And you were on a TED Talk, which I think is something really cool that I would love for you to talk about that experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So the TED Talk is really random, because that was like my first real speaking engagement. I
Hmm.
was like a year into Benet at that time, and I got to do a TED Talk, right? That was kind of crazy. I feel like most people, like there's levels, like you do kind of like you're already on the speaking circuit, you've already spoken at several conferences, you've done this for some time. Whereas like I hadn't done any of that. My first situation was a TED Talk. So, for so many years, I was like, I cringed at looking at my TED Talk because I was like, ew, I hate how I sounded. I hate how I looked. I was like, oh, disgusting. Whenever people would like bring it up, I would like literally, I could feel my body tense up. But now I look back on my TED Talk and I'm like, wow, what I said was actually pretty powerful
Yeah.
and has really been the story of my journey.
Yeah.
And it was breaking free from the plan and letting your vision guide you. So obviously with Benet, that was my plan. That was, what I had set out to do. And it didn't work out. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't meant to keep going.
Right.
Right. So that doesn't mean that I still wasn't meant to bring my vision to life. And so many times we fail, or we quote unquote failure and we think that that's like the universe telling us that we should stop, or the universe telling us that we're not meant to do it. And I think it is just like, I think it's a comma, not a period, right? I don't think it ends your story, but I do think it's, just a continuation. You get to choose to continue it. And so, yeah, I have allowed, okay, my vision to take shape and form and look a number of different ways along this journey. And none of what I thought I would be doing, when I first started. But I look at it and I'm like, my vision is still the same. My why is still the same. And so therefore, I'm still on the right path.
Yeah. Um, it's just, I love that. Let your vision guide you. And I feel like I can very much relate to what that experience feels like, because my entire life I wanted to be a fashion designer for like as long as I can remember. I was dead set on going to FIT. I was like, if I don't get in, then I'll apply again. Like, that's the only school I applied to. Like, this is what I want. I moved to New York City. I did all the fashion things. Super, like, my identity was really wrapped up in like, well, I do fashion and I make dresses, and I got a job doing that. And that's when we met. And so I was, making dresses. And at that time, I got into my fitness journey. And it was a very confusing feeling because I started to realize how much fitness was becoming a priority in my life, and how my vision didn't align with making wedding gowns anymore. Not because there
Right.
wasn't
Because that was
value
your
in,
plan.
yeah, like, but it was like you, there was like this pressure that was, I put on myself because
Right.
nobody was like, well, you have to do fashion and you have to stick with it forever. Like nobody said those words to me, but in my head, I was like, but no, this is what I'm doing and I have to be here. And, and it was really hard, like to make the transition into fitness and then into like my business. And it was a very weird time.
Mm-hmm.
And but once I let go and like just allowed myself to do what felt right,
Yeah.
it feels so much better. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that feeling. And I love that. Let your vision guide you. Yeah.
Yeah, because so many times we put ourselves in these boxes and these
Mm-hmm.
self-imposed constraints of what things have to look like and what things have to be,
Yeah.
that we don't allow ourselves to expand. We don't allow ourselves to grow and to explore new things and to, see what else lights us up about life. And it can be so many things on this journey, and I think that's okay, right? Who
Yeah.
said it has to look one way, that you have to do this one thing forever?
Right.
And so yeah, it's like these self-imposed constraints that we put on ourselves, these boxes that we put on ourselves, put
Yeah.
ourselves in.
Right. Yeah. And I
Mhm.
was the same way about living in New York. I moved there and I was like, well, I have to be here forever now because that's what I said I wanted.
Yeah.
And it took too long for me to realize that's not what I wanted because I was
Mhm.
just stubborn in like the story I told myself.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
when I
I mean,
left,
because New York is New York, right? Like,
yeah,
what a dream. It's
right.
like, I'm, in this city, I'm making moves, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I mean, New York has a lot of hype in it, which I love. I subscribe to the New York
Yeah.
hype. But I mean, it also gets to a point where it's like, okay, well, I don't necessarily want this anymore. And so
Right.
I always say you have the right to choose. You get
Mhm.
you get to say, yeah, I want to be in New York now, and I cannot want to be in New York a month or two later, right? So
Right.
it's like, again, have you ever heard don't should on yourself?
Oh, I haven't, but I love that.
Yeah. So don't should on yourself. I should do this. I should be here. I should be in this job. I should be in this point of my life. No, like, where you are is where you are. You get to choose at any state, at any point in time. And so it's like, don't put those pressures of I should. So don't should on yourself. And I love that saying.
That's fantastic. And I feel like so many people can grab onto that because I mean, how many times do you say I should do something throughout a
Oh my
day? You know
gosh.
what I
It's the
mean? Like, oh,
pressure.
I should be eating this. I shouldn't be eating that. I should work out. I should like it can be really small, like small scale daily habits or
Yeah.
like in your life. Like I should live in New York because I said I was going to,
Mhm.
but like
It's
it can
so
change.
much pressure. You can change and you get to choose.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the liberation of life. It's like, I get to do this however I want to do it.
Yeah. So from your talk show to like the launch of your talk show to now, what has that looked like? Where has your vision brought you?
So the journey with Blue has been really great. So again, this was something that I just like thought of. I didn't really like have a true plan around it. I had never been a host. I had never done like speaking on that level or anything. And so I went to one of my friends and I was like, hey, like, I have this idea for a show. I would love for you to be the videographer or
Mhm.
whatever. And she was like, well, I don't do videography. And I was like, well, I've never been a host. So, let's just kind of get that out the way. Yeah, I've never done it. You've never done it. We're just going to do it. And so we did. And the first season I shot in Atlanta right before I moved to New York. And it looked great. I don't even know if the conversations were great. They probably weren't. I'm like too scared to even look back at it. but yeah, and so I just started, and then the second season I shot again in Atlanta. Because it was so hard to shoot in New York. I couldn't find a place that would let me shoot for free. And I was like, well, I can't let this literally stop my show. So
Right.
came back to Atlanta and shot. The second season got picked up through national distribution through a platform called TV One, I One. And then the third season, I knew at the beginning of 2020 that I wanted to shoot the show. And like we all know, then the pandemic came and shut down life and changed everything. And so everyone was like, well, why don't you just shoot, the show via Zoom? And I was like that wasn't my vision. That's not
Mhm.
how I had seen this. And I was like, no, I still really want to do this in person. I feel like, there's a beautiful connection being able to sit and touch someone and, those things.
Right.
And I had no clue how I was going to make it happen. I don't know if I had the budget to make it happen. I didn't have any of my team. I didn't know who was going to do the video or any of this stuff. But again, I was like, I'm going to see this through because I know if I don't do it, I'm going to regret it.
Yeah.
And so I was scared, really scared, made some phone calls of some really great, powerful entrepreneurs that I know. And I asked for a favor, a really big favor, for them to come to my house in Brooklyn and sit with me in the middle of COVID to have a conversation. And of course, they're like, some of them were like, well, what are the COVID stipulations? Because again, this was in 2020. It was still in the height of everything. New
Right.
York has always been the epicenter of everything. And so this was a big ask. But I asked them, I made those phone calls. I was able to get a videographer. I was able to get a stylist and a photographer and team to support me. I transformed my home and we shot there and we made it happen. And it is one of those, quoting The Alchemist, it's like when you, I guess, start on your path, like the universe will conspire in your favor. And it's like, you have to make the steps.
Yeah.
Right. Because again, if I was sitting and like questioning, well, how are you going to have the money? Who are you going to find? Everyone's going to say no to you. Like none of this makes sense. Like, Michelle, the world is literally shut down and you are worried about a talk show.
Mhm.
So if I would have let all those doubts and considerations and the reality of the situation come up and keep me, then I never would have moved. And I
Right.
never would have been able to create what I was able to create. And so, yeah, the third season was amazing.
Yeah.
It is so much of the direction that, I obviously have conversations around, but even coach women around. So it's around the mindset, success, and spiritual principles that you need to take the leap, to step
Mhm.
into your dreams, to step into your purpose. And so it's true transformation, is how do you show up from the inside out? And like I said, some of my guests, Danielle Leslie, she spectacular story, started a course from scratch where she teaches women how to start a course, but she went from zero to $16 million in 4 years with her business. Brandis Daniel, creator of Harlem's Fashion Row, who's done huge partnerships with Nike and LeBron James and Gap, Banana Republic, so many brands, and getting designers of color representation and opportunities. Renee Blewett, who is the producer, she did that film, which is now on Netflix. So it was just like, I was just calling people and scared and praying, like, please say yes to me.
Right.
And they said yes. And we made it happen.
So incredible. I have two questions I want to ask. One, well, no, I'm just going to ask one for now, and then I'll ask the next one later. So you coach women in being able to step into like their vision and whatever that might be. So although it's really beautiful and wonderful to be able to do what you love to do and live your purpose, we all have to pay bills, right? And life isn't free. So, and I hope you have an answer to this because I would like the answer. How do you make that financially possible to be able to
So
just take the risk and do what you love to do and survive and, buy groceries?
So that's a really great question. And I have done so many things in this journey so that I could live and survive while I was going for my dream.
Yeah.
So in the beginning years, I mean, there were a number of things, Paige, and like things that like I hated,
Yeah.
things that like I would have never thought I would have done. So the people at Sam's Club
Mm-hmm.
who are like selling samples or whatever, who
Yeah.
are like pushing samples on you. So at one point in my life, immediately after graduation, now get this, I am graduating from the University of Georgia, great school, with a business degree. Everyone knows that I'm starting a business, and I am in Sam's Club pushing for focaccia bread pizza, to people. And did I feel like I was above that? Yes. Did I feel like I thought my dream was worth it? Yes. And so I do get emotional about that because those are the decisions you have to make. Those are the sacrifices you have to make. And that's one of many, right? So the dream comes with a cost.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to pay that. Because you're also going to see your friends who made different decisions, who may have gone into jobs and now have corporate careers and salaries, and they can do different things, right? They can buy houses, they can buy the cars and do the trips and the vacations more immediately than you can. And you also have to be so grounded in your why in this, in your vision, in your purpose, that you don't let that stuff rock you.
Right.
Now, yeah, I'm not going to say you're not going to feel any emotion towards it, because you will, right? And you will start to question like, dang, what am I doing? But again, it's knowing that your payoff, what you are working towards, will give you the rewards that are meant for you.
Right.
So.
That is so powerful. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because for anybody who is an entrepreneur or has a lot of friends who own businesses or whatever, it's very easy to make the quote unquote or like hashtag entrepreneur life like this really like shiny thing, right?
Right.
But it's not. Like you're saying, you were working in Sam's Club, and there's been so many times in throughout me running my business that I've also felt like above a job, but then I'm like, you know what? I'm not above anything just because I own a business. Like, do I still drive and deliver Uber Eats on the weekends? Yes, I do. Because if I don't, this business doesn't happen and I can't eat. Like and I've been in business for 6 years. I mean, like you do what you have to do. I was teaching 2-3 indoor cycling classes a day before. Did I love teaching? Yes. But is it healthy to teach that much? Absolutely not. And I've picked up super random jobs, like, just being a body in a room because they need a body in a room. You do.
I've done it all.
Yeah. And
Right.
I love that you say that, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't say that. It's just like, oh, I make my own schedule. I design my life. It's the life of my dreams. But it's like, in order to have those things, like, yeah, I make my own schedule, but like, also I'm driving Uber Eats sometimes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the things like in the very beginning of my journey, but even in New York, but New York is also created for people like us.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities and ways to make it, but
Yeah.
I was an extra on movies. I was in like a music video, and I did it all. Like I temped in offices.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you do it. And obviously, it is these short-term sacrifices for the greater return that that you're building towards, right? And so I always say, there's you do have to be wise in this decision making and what you're building, and having true awareness of where you are and what you're
Mhm.
creating, and the viability of it as well. So it's like you have to be in reality, but you don't have, like, you can't be in reality too.
Right.
Right. Um, so yeah, it's a really interesting, I don't know, kind of balancing act, I would say. But
Yeah.
I've been through it all,
Yeah.
all, Paige.
I feel you on that. So, what does the future of the journey with Blue look like as far as, I mean, I know you're a coach and a host, so
Hmm.
all of that. Like where are you now? What are your plans? What's your vision?
Yeah. So that's a really great question, because I am in a place of revisioning, I guess is
Yeah.
revision, right? Re-envisioning what the journey with Blue looks like, because I do have the bigger seasons of the shows. But I think that's just so much of a gap between me and the connection with my audience. And so I'm looking at opportunities of, doing a podcast as well. So there's a little bit more consistent connection.
Mhm.
I am hosting, launching, this is news, but launching an event series here in Atlanta. To also like be able to get people in person, because I think we're all like fiending for some in-person connection.
Yeah.
And so doing some live events and conversations, which do have a coaching element to it as well,
Mhm.
for women to be able to be a part of. Um, and then obviously the bigger shows as well. And
Yeah.
then I do offer coaching, so one-on-one, and group coaching too.
Yeah. I saw you post something the other day
Mhm.
about government contracts. Am I
Oh,
allowed to ask you about that?
yeah.
Like, what?
Yes. So it is interesting. It's something, one of those things that was birthed during the pandemic, because life had shifted. Um, there were no live events. So doing the journey with Blue, like paid live speaking engagements and things like that wasn't an option. And
Mhm.
so it was one of those things, thinking about, okay, well, what can I still offer, right? And how do I
Mhm.
still live? And so I started an education consulting company. So now I also teach entrepreneurship, in pretty much in the school system in New York, as well as like adults, who are looking for like career kind of placement and opportunities as well.
Holy cow.
It's kind of crazy.
I
I'm
mean,
not even gonna lie, it is a little crazy.
what does that look like? I mean, I don't know how to even ask the question I want to ask, but like,
Yeah.
what?
Well, it is kind of a what, and I think it has even taken me by surprise,
Yeah.
because I started it and I didn't really have, um, many connections like in this space,
Hmm.
but I was very blessed early on. So the New York City Department of Education is my biggest client,
Oh
which
my
is like,
gosh.
okay, like, how did that happen? And so it has been a great opportunity. And yeah, I mean, it looks like now I do some facilitation, but I do have facilitators that work with me, who lead these workshops. It has looked like building out a curriculum for a full district of like students, and helping them learn entrepreneurship from a STEAM perspective. So when I say like it is still a part of my vision of a purpose driven human being and helping other people step into their purpose, um, it still aligns and I love it. And it also has been, a great source of income as I
Yeah.
continue this journey.
It's so cool because although the different phases of your journey or the different steps you've taken all look so different, but you really are from like the girl who started Benet to what you're doing now, like you're still working towards, like you said, you're working towards that purpose and
Yeah.
living in that. And I just think that's so wonderful that you're able to pivot what you're doing, but
Yeah.
still able to work towards the thing that you really care about. So
helping people step into their dreams, right? Step into their purpose, and exposing them, and giving them access to things on a higher level. And so that's really what the work has always been about.
Oh, I love that so much. So if you could give advice to your younger self, what would it be? And would you change anything?
No, I can't change
two-part
anything.
Question. Okay.
I can't change anything. Because one change changes everything.
Right. Love that.
And I take this journey for the mess, the beauty, the lessons, the failures, the sacrifices that it's been.
Yeah.
And again, I chose that. And I'm very thankful with my choice. I'm very happy with my choice.
Yeah.
I'm still very much in my process and in my journey. So I don't speak this from someone who's arrived, who's made the millions, and, has had this global impact. But I can say, like, I chose this life, and I think I chose what was best for me. I think one of the lessons would be like, just to be free. I think there's so much of thinking about what other people think about you and how things are going to come off, and having to be in this pretty picture of life when life is just life, right? And I think, again, being able to show up and be as authentic in that as possible.
Yeah. I'll ask one more question and we'll wrap this up. For anybody who is ready to take the leap, take a risk, step into their power, but they're not sure how to do that, or they're maybe hesitant, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. Well, first, I would say contact me. Because
give me a call.
Yes, give me a call, hit me up. Because that's what I support women in doing, right? In understanding, like, what are the fears, what are the doubts, what are the hesitations, and giving you a system that's going to support you, obviously, in shifting your mindset, shifting your perspective, but also giving you, supporting you in creating that strategy to eliminate some of that stress. And so call me. But for those who are taking the leap, I always say, right on the other side of your leap is the life and business of your dreams. And so, again, it is you get to choose. Will you let your fears keep you in a place that's, is not for you, in a lesser version of yourself, or will you decide to move? And it really is just a choice of action.
I love that. Where can our listeners find you, follow you, check you out, see what you're doing?
Yeah, so I would love for people to follow along the journey. They can find me on social media, on Instagram at the Michelle Blue. So that's THE Michelle Blue. On YouTube, The Journey with Blue. And then my website is thejourneywithblue.com.
Amazing. And we'll put that in the show notes so people can copy and paste it and check you out.
Yes, please come find me.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I am so happy that we've reconnected. It's so awesome to watch your journey and everything that you've done. Although we haven't spoken in years, I've been seeing everything that you're doing, and it's really exciting to see. And it also, like you said before, you're not alone. Like, it makes me feel better in my journey, knowing that, other entrepreneurs are feeling the same way. So I appreciate you sharing.
Breathe, we all just have to take that breath and to release. And I always say, just remember that it's an adventure, right? Like, go at this as like the next adventure and have fun with it.
Yeah.
Be free with it, and know, it is going to be messy. You are going to fall, but you do get back up.
Yeah. Oh, love it so much. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you everyone for listening in, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Paige.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Move More, Worry Less. If you love this episode, Please subscribe, share, rate, or review us to help us grow our mission. If you don't already, follow us on social at 13fit Apparel and visit our website at www.13fitapparel.com. Thanks for listening.